Okay, so I'd like to run you through how, when we're recruiting, we use behavioural profiling. And the important thing is to recognise that we can all modify our behaviour to a greater or lesser extent. And when people are in a recruitment situation, this is what we do naturally. Sometimes people do it on a conscious level, sometimes it's a subconscious level, but we can all modify our behaviour to a greater or lesser extent. So what happens when we're recruiting, what we see sitting across the table or the interview room isn't what we actually get in real life when the person joins us. So I'm going to run you through a process that we use, which is an upside down version of recruiting. We don't recruit as such. We're not a full recruitment service, but we provide a support service to recruiters and to businesses and to clients. So just running through, as I said, what you see often is not what you get. And we have created something called squegs. A squeg is a square peg in a round hole, and squegs are really, really expensive to hire. A squeg will cost your organisation an absolute fortune in wasted management time, wasted meeting time, appraisals. You're trying to fit somebody into a slot that they're not comfortably suited to. So why bother doing all that when you can actually hire the right people in the first place? So as I've said, we find that people modify their behaviour, and it's about 3 months that people can pretend that they're something that they're not. And as coincidence would have it, that's when recruitment companies wash their hands of you. They will give you a refund if the candidate doesn't turn out, but after 3 months, that's it. Absolutely no refund at all. So unless you make the right choices to start off with, it's going to be very expensive. So we've got some statistics here. Absenteeism, stress levels. Senior managers take an average of 11 days a year sick, and that again causes problems with your bottom line profits. If you're hiring people who aren't suitable for the role that you want them to work to, it doesn't just affect them, it affects their families, it affects the team members, it affects the senior members, it goes right up to the CEO and back again. So let's just run through. Okay, health in the workplace is huge, and a lot of it is stress related. So again, this is all about identifying what behaviours fit roles, what behaviours are needed in teams, and how you can mitigate against that by hiring the right people, but also having a huge impact on their health. Women are 16% more likely to suffer from stress than men for some reason. Not quite sure why that is, but it's all been produced as part of a study here. The labour force survey, which was done by Cardiff University a while back. Tension and stress occurs when the behaviour of an individual in the workplace differs to their natural behaviour. So what we want to see is the natural person coming into work and behaving in a natural way. Very often we have people who are meek and mild in the real world. They come into work and peer pressure, maybe their pressure, they feel that like they've got to put on an act, they might put on a suit, a uniform. They'll be behaving in ways that actually aren't congruent with who they are. That builds up stresses and strains, that builds up conflict, internal conflict. They're miserable, they're not productive, and they infect the people that they work with. So stress is a huge impact in the workplace. Okay, 80% of management time very often is spent looking after 20% of the employees who are squegs, the square pegs in the round holes. So if you can reduce the level of management time, which is very, very expensive, by not having to support, cajole, motivate, manage, whatever, these individuals, and that's going to save a huge amount on the bottom line. And it's going to be a happier culture, happier environment, etc. We're not talking about wholesale redundancies or sacking people or anything like that. We're talking about identifying the individuals' behaviours and working to their strengths. That's what this is about. It's about working to people's strengths. Okay, so we use the DISC model, which is dominance, influence, steadiness and compliance. Whoops, trigger happy on this chart here. Okay, so DISC, if you were to Google the DISC model of behavioural profiling, this is what you would come up with. It's not a colour model, but there are models out there who use colours. So we've identified the colours that relate to the behavioural strengths so that you can then see how you fit in when you're looking at other models. So years ago when I got trained in behavioural profiling, I used to work in schools. I would mentor head teachers and I would work with the senior management teams and help them to identify their own behaviours, but also that impacted in the classroom and looking at the behavioural characteristics of the children and lesson planning so that they were then planning the lessons in accordance with the individual behaviour characteristics for the children. So I've kept to this day the pictures. So each behavioural style will have a picture and we know every picture tells a story. So the high Ds, which you'll recall is the dominant, so highly dominant people depicted by the lion. So on a good hair day, we've got these strengths. So assertive, decisive, direct, demanding, competitive. Now, they're great attributes if they are used in the right way. In certain situations where you want soft, kind, fluffy, this is not the sort of person you want in that situation. However, if you want to get things done, then that's exactly what you need. Somebody who's got these strengths. So they can come across to other styles as being aggressive, impatient, abrupt and insensitive. So if you've got people who are very kind, soft and gentle, then in an organisation they will feel intimidated by these people and you can see very quickly that you've got a potential workplace bullying type of situation that occurs. Although these people very often aren't aware that they are perceived by other people as these very, very strong characters. So it's about contextualising how you can use your behaviours in certain situations to best advantage. So the high Ds are strong characters depicted by the lion. The high I, the dolphins, so that's all about influence, outgoing, inspiring sort of characters. And you can imagine the behaviour of the lion is totally different to the behaviour of a dolphin. So they are free-spirited, fun-loving, persuasive, and there's another one here, let me twiddle the knob, charming. So they're outgoing people, they're very socially aware, they're very friendly, they're kind of the glue that keeps an organisation together. So these are your high I people. And again, they can come over as being quite annoying to people who want to keep their head down, concentrate on work that needs a lot of detail, attention to detail. So these are not your detail people, these are your happy people. They work with and through people. So again, you can see the difference already between the lion and the dolphin. So our third one in the disc mnemonic is the little puppy dog, oh bless. So the little puppy dog, as you can imagine from the picture and the behaviours, soft, kind, gentle, patient, friendly, loyal and amiable, very kind. So these people are the supportive, nurturing kinds in an organisation, and these will be the ones where the high eyes are flinging themselves around a dance floor, making a spectacle of themselves, having fun, having a laugh. These will be making sure that everybody's coats hang up, everybody's got a drink, everybody's comfortable, that kind of thing. So you can see the difference between the lion and the puppy dog. So, but they can come across as being indecisive, negative, lacking focus, and they'll sit on the fence. So you imagine the lion and the puppy dog, there is a conflict there. So these are the individuals that in an organisation take a lot of support. They're very supportive themselves, but also they need a lot of support. Whereas the high Ds will be off there doing their own thing, not abiding by the rules, making their own rules up. So you can see we've got quite a breadth of different behavioural characteristics. There's no right, there's no wrong in behaviour of these types that we're talking about now. It's about how you can use the behavioural strengths to best advantage. And you can see certain situations will require certain behaviours. The lions will be wanting these high S's to make a decision, and they'll be very agitated when the high S's will say, well, what about this person? What about that person? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? But we need that balance in an organisation to be able to function properly. So the final one in the disc mnemonic is the owl. These are people who say very little. Very often they're clever, although this isn't an IQ model, this is a behaviour model. But they get their knowledge by listening, not talking very much. They're listening to everybody, taking everything in. When they do speak, they will quote you chapter verse, and they will be very authoritative and can come over sometimes as being like the high Ds, but actually they're quite reserved in nature. So they can come over as being too formal and rigid, uncommunicative, because they're not saying anything. We've got the high Is that are speaking for England. So you can see in a team, you need all of those characteristics to be able to function properly and be very effective. What very often happens though in a team is that the different styles will be irritated by one another, and they will start arguing and think that the behaviour is directed towards them. Our behaviours go back to the days of identified by Hippocrates in 400 BC. So this particular model, the disc mnemonic model, is just one of a whole range of models out there for behavioural profiling. If you Google behavioural profiling, you'll come up with a whole range. But they all started primarily into the 4 humours that Hippocrates, who was a doctor, and that's also bringing me back to the health aspect of it. Our behaviour determines our health, and how we behave will determine how we are on a health level as well, which I'll go on to shortly. So that's a really quick summary of the DISC characteristics. And looking at other models, you can map the colours that we've got, and there's various other names that you can link and identify the DISC, the animals, however you want to see this information. Okay, so we've got, let me just go to, all right, okay. What happens in the workplace is that I'm going to go on to change this chart over. We have different behaviour patterns. So when we do a full behavioural profiling for people, we will then come up with a shape. Obviously, I don't expect you to read this, but I'm going to draw on the board in a moment. So we've got, how do we do this? We do this. Yeah. Okay, so using DISC, we find that we have graph shapes when we come up with the individual reports. So somebody who is a high D and a high C very often has low I and low S. So you remember that the D is the lion, the C is the owl. So in the same person, you've got high authority, outgoing, direct, telling kind of style. Then you've got the high C, which is all about detail, compliance, following systems and procedures. Both D and C are all about task. There's no people stuff there at all. The S and the I are about people. So the outgoing dolphin, the soft, fluffy, cuddly little dog. So you've got the people stuff, which in this case is under the line, the centre line. Anything above the centre line is what we call the high characteristics. So when we're looking at leadership styles, for example, this is a very common leadership style. I've profiled thousands of people over the years, and the people that are effective are usually one of 2 different styles of behaviour. Now, this is not a popular style, but it is an effective style. This is a typical head teacher, for example. I've profiled lots, and this is common for head teachers. In perhaps days gone by, I think they're more like doctors are more aware now of the bedside manner, as it were. But this is very directive, and it's telling you, you will do things my way, you'll do them now, and I want you to do them 100 miles an hour. The S characteristic here, if somebody is a high S, they're the high steady, all the characteristics we looked at on the slide, this is the opposite of high steady, so it's doing things multitasking, doing lots of things at the same time. The other common behavioural pattern in leadership is looks like this. So we've still got the high D, but we've got a high I this time. So we've got the dolphin and we've got the lion. So dolphins work with and through people, but if that doesn't work with a smile on their face, then the lion comes out and they start telling. So they start persuading and charming, but if that doesn't work, then they start telling. Still the low S, so 100 miles an hour, multitasking, but you can see the C is different. These people aren't bothered about rules and regulations, and they will break the rules, but they'll do it with a smile on their face. They'll talk themselves in and out of all kinds of situations. So these are the two very common leadership styles. The one with the D and the I, high, that's more popular, but equally as effective as the other one. And when you're hiring people, you can see the leading strengths are really important to look at, because people can modify depending where the level of S behaviour is. People, that will tell you how much somebody can modify their behaviour. If somebody's a high S, they've got a very limited level of modification on behaviour. The lower somebody's S, the more they can be modifying, adapting their behaviour. And when you're talking about leadership roles, so if you're recruiting senior managers in, they're good styles to have a low S, because you've then got modification, and they will be able to modify their behaviour according to the context of the situation. On the other hand, if you want an accountant, then the style that would be useful for, say, an accountant or anybody who needs to give attention to detail, this is the style that you're looking at for that behaviour pattern. So you can see we've got lots of different styles of behaviour, but we all have DIS and C in us to a greater or lesser extent, and it's the level of strength that we have on each of the characteristics that will determine how our leading behaviours are perceived by other people. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. So we come up with graphs. So we've got the internal profile, which is a true person. We've got the work pattern, and then we've got a summary. So what we want to see, as in this case, is everybody is looking the same. So whether they're in work or out of work, they are suitably, so they behave completely congruent with their behaviour. We can match them to roles. So this person, you can see just by the overall shape here, that person is suited to their role. Same person matched to a different role, marketing role. This is the behaviours that we want to see for the marketing role, and this is the person's behaviour again, and that you can see just by looking at the picture that's not a happy situation. You wouldn't want that person for a marketing role. We look at the tension levels that everybody's under when we're profiling, and one of the things that we can tell is how far out of the comfort zone the individual person is. So we look at their natural style, we look at their work style, and then our model looks at the differences between one style and the other style. And we do some analysis, manual analysis, and it tells us how much they're modifying their behaviour. What typically happens is the leaders, whether it's a team leader, the CEO, they will be very, very adaptable. They will have a low S, and they will be able to modify their behaviour at a considerable level. So this is a real life study. Obviously names have been changed to protect the innocent, but we've got the leader here. They've got a huge level of modification still left within their behavioural pattern. This company wanted to change the direction of where they were going with their service offering, and they wanted to bring in another service offering. And they asked me to have a look at the team to see what the capacity was. Well, you can see here, this isn't rocket science. The boss has got loads of capability left. All the team are stressed out to the hill. They're in negative capacity. So we can tell all kinds of information by looking at the profiles. And that's why we work with CEOs, ideally, managing directors, managing partners, or whatever you happen to be called, so that we can see at a strategic level how we can help you with your people and to make sure you've got the right people in the right slots doing the right thing. So that's why I started off talking about recruitment. When you've got people in the business who aren't performing, very often they are the squigs that we talked about, the square pegs in the round holes, and it's very easy to identify them by going through this process and then help them to move into organisational position that suits. So we might be tweaking around here and there with the organisational structure. So just to recap on that, we've got 4 basic personality styles, D, I, S and C. You could also look at them in terms of the power. For the Ds, the people is the Is, pace is the high S, so people who are high S don't have a great deal of modification, but they will be working at a slower, measured, more a slower pace than the Ds and the Is. Ds and Is go at 100 miles an hour with the low S, which is the pace. The high S's work through a structured, ordered system. Procedure is what drives the high Cs. They're looking at the rule book. Never argue with a high C because they will absolutely trounce you. They will quote chapter and verse, so they may not say anything in meetings, for example, but when you need them to say something, it will be absolutely spot on. So never argue with a high C unless you know all the facts. Then they can get quite narky with you because they think they're right because they've looked at the facts, weighed all the risks up. So every behaviour has its strength, every behaviour has its limitations. There's no right, there's no wrong. We just have what we have, and it's about understanding what we have and using to best advantage. Okay, obviously you can't get people to fill in questionnaires to know what the behavioural style of the person is, but there's other ways that you can look at. So for example, the communication style, how people communicate verbally, but also physically, how they walk, how they, sort of body language we can look at as well in a moment. So how they communicate, whether it's on the telephone, through emails, face to face, people will give away their behavioural styles through their behavioural, their leading behavioural strength. So you can see here that we've got a number of different styles, some talkative, some not. Okay, another way that you can tell people's behaviours is body language. I don't know how many of you enjoy people watching. So you have, you sit there and have a cup of coffee on the street corner and you just watch people. You can actually tell people's leading styles by their behaviour. So you've got some people that are chatting away, other people who are just head down, just concentrating, don't want to be contacted by anybody, no eye contact and so on, and you've got everything in between. So there's lots of different styles. So when you're dealing with your clients, your prospects, your staff members, members of family, friends, all this stuff goes into workplace and in social life as well. But you can gauge somebody's behavioural style. You can then modify your own behaviour to help that person to feel more comfortable. Okay, I mentioned earlier on about health, and our behaviour determines our health, and it's no coincidence that all this started with Hippocrates, as I mentioned, in 400 BC. And our behaviour, when we're younger, determines our behaviour and our success as we get older, and our health. The Jesuits have a saying, give me the boy till he's 7 and I'll give you the man. So all this stuff, and again why I started in schools many years ago, was so that I could help young people to know who they were from day one, when they started becoming aware of different behaviours, so that they could find their true path. Lots of people go through life not knowing who they are, and they're miserable, they're unhappy, and they're unhealthy. So we've listed here some health challenges that are very common to some of the behavioural styles. So the high Ds, these are your road rage victims and road rage people. They'll go out there and they'll be really upset if they're in a traffic jam, for example. Whereas the high S's or the high C's will probably sit there, reading a book or something and be quite happy that they've got a bit of extra time. So the behaviour that we display on a day-to-day basis will determine our health outcomes. Absolutely true to type. So the high Ds try to improve everything to their way, not to anybody else's way. High Is do too much. They tend to get burnout and breakdowns and all that kind of thing. The S's, they worry about everything, so they internalise. S and C is about internal behaviours, D and I is external. So you know what's happening with a D and I because they display it, they tell you. Whereas the S and C's, they internalise everything. On the surface, they may say they're okay, but actually deep down, they're not too happy. And they hold on to thoughts and things. So the high C, if you ever do pick them up on something that they thought that they were right on, these are the people that will actually bear a grudge, and they'll be, upsetting teams for years to come unless you deal with whatever that thing is that has upset them. So various different ways, and underline all of that. When we're stressed, we hold ourselves differently, and our arteries constrict. So when we're in stressful situation, so the high C's, the owls, if they're in a situation where they're expected to be assertive and outgoing, which is not their natural style, they will be stressed. They will hold themselves differently. When they're stressed and we hold ourselves differently, our arteries constrict. If our arteries are filled with plaque, then they're a heart attack or a stroke waiting to happen. Conversely, if the high D's are asked to do something that is too slow for them, they will be stressed out if any things aren't happening quick enough for them. So whatever the situation is, underlying all of this is arterial stiffness, and that's what's led me to create the health company, Health Watchers UK, because the health of the CEO, top team in particular, and then the team members will determine how healthy your business is, whether it's financially healthy, whether it's physically healthy, the culture, and so on. And we have a number of devices that we'll talk about on another occasion on how we can help you practically to look at the health of your business. Okay, so to summarise then, we've got people who are task orientated. So the D's and the C's are task people. They're not worried in the slightest about the people. They're on about getting things done quickly, getting them done properly, following a system and a procedure. The high I's and the S's is all about people. They're not too fussed about the task. So the high I's want to do everything in a happy, fun environment. High S's want to do things in a very caring, slower environment. So apart from having the people and the task differences, we also have the pace differences. So we've got the D's and the I's are outgoing, fast pace, their glass is half full, and very often it's overflowing in fact. Whereas you've got the S and the C's work more at a slow, it's like the hare and the tortoise, so they're working at a slower pace, but they're getting things done properly. Their glass is half empty quite often, and they weigh up the risks. So you can see you need all of these behaviours in a team in order for the team to be balanced and to be effective. Okay, there's lots of talk about emotional intelligence, and the emotional intelligence dialogue started in early 1990s with Professor Daniel Goleman at Harvard University, and he identified that leaders who were very effective were high in emotional intelligence. So that's all about understanding who you are and managing who you are. So we've got two aspects, personal competence and social competence. So personal competence is about being self-aware, and this affects yourselves as leaders and also with your team members. If they know who they are, know what their strengths are, they can then put themselves in situations that are congruent with who they are. They're going to be effective, they're going to be self-motivated, self-managed. If they know, so for example, my behavioural style, I know that I'm too much for some people and I physically have to stand back and zip up. So I'm self-aware, and therefore I can manage myself in certain situations where I have to be less outgoing. The other part of this equation is social competence, and if you know how you differ to other people's behaviour, and then you can manage that relationship, because we have the knowledge about behavioural profiling, we can modify our behaviours, and if we have that knowledge and we use it effectively, we can then help other people to be more comfortable, more effective, and we'll have a much better working team. That in turn will lift the spirits in the business. It will certainly lift the profit margins because you're spending less time managing people and more time doing fun things that you enjoy and making lots of profit. So thank you very much for your time, and please do get in contact if you need any more information.